This meeting is being recorded.
So my name is Rachel Endo. I am a health educator with A Step Ahead Chattanooga. We provide access to free birth control to any individual who lives or goes to school within our 18 county service area. We also provide education about reproductive health. Sorry, I've got a dog running into the room. We provide education about reproductive health to any individual living in that service area as well. And that education is free for anyone who's interested. This webinar is also being facilitated with another health educator at A Step Ahead, who is Robin Monroe, and I'll let her introduce herself for a minute.
Hi, I'm Robin Monroe. As she said, I'm a health educator in the Polk County area, Bradley. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Okay. And so again, tonight is the Tough Talks webinar for understanding human trafficking. This is our fourth Tough Talk. So we're just happy to continue this webinar series. We know that there are a lot of really challenging conversations that people need to be having, but sometimes they don't know how to get those conversations going. So we're glad that you've decided to join us tonight. So just a couple housekeeping things. Please keep your camera off if you are not a part of the panel, and please keep your microphone on mute. Once I stop sharing my screen and it shifts back to all the little boxes, if you want, at the very top, there's an option where you can click and select speaker view, and that'll just highlight the speakers. I think there's also an option where you can select hide non-video participants, and that way it would be only the panelists on the screen. If you do have a question, you can either direct message myself or Robin Monroe, or you can just put it in the general chat box. If it comes up and it is relevant to a question that's currently being asked, we will ask it then. Otherwise, we'll hold it to the end when we have a question and answer session at the very end. Great. So our first thing that we're going to do is I've talked a little bit about what we do at A Step Ahead. So we're going to introduce you to our wonderful panelists. Our first panelist is Tikka Watkins. So Tikka, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I am Tikka Watkins. I am with Street Grace. I am the outreach coordinator for the state of Tennessee.
Okay, great, thanks. And next we have Christina Higgins.
I'm Christina. I'm the survivor care coordinator at Willow Bend Farms in Cleveland, Tennessee.
And then finally we have Janice Johnson.
Hi, I'm Janice Johnson. I'm the national legal advocate and survivor leader for Her Song for Chattanooga.
Okay. So you'll hear a little bit more from our panelists once we get into our panel discussion. But before we get started, our agenda for today, we're going to have just a short poll where we're going to ask you all some questions to kind of gauge what you already know about human trafficking and see hopefully where we can fill some knowledge gaps for you as we go through tonight. We'll briefly talk about some statistics behind human trafficking and give you a basic definition of what human trafficking is. And then we'll shift into a panel discussion and take some questions from you all as well. Okay, so this is going to have just a poll pop up on your screen. If you feel comfortable to answer these questions, they are anonymous. We'll just see the results of the poll. And we'll just take a couple minutes. You can go through and answer them. Did the poll questions pop up? Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. Just wanted to make sure. So about 50% of people have participated so far. So we'll just take another minute and a half to wrap this up, and then we'll kind of review what information we gathered. Okay, so a good bit of the participants have participated in the poll, so we'll start going through the results. So for the first question, when I think about the term human trafficking, about 27% of you said that the definition is kind of confusing and unclear. 30% think of human trafficking as just smuggling or kidnapping. And about 40% said that you feel that you have a full understanding of what human trafficking is. For question 2, is the phrase human trafficking the same as sex trafficking in your mind? About 33% said yes, 53% said no, and 13% of you said that you were a little unsure. For question 3, do you know the difference between labor trafficking and sex trafficking? The vast majority of you all, about 70%, said that either you kind of understood the differences or that you didn't really know the difference enough to like distinguish if you were asked questions. So hopefully, as we move along tonight, you'll be able to better distinguish the differences in these kinds of trafficking. For question 4, we ask, what sources have you gotten the majority of your information regarding human trafficking for? And the vast majority of you said that you have gotten it from local, state, or federal organizations like the lovely organizations that we have on our panel today. But a good few of you also said from the news, from crime shows, and then from nonfiction books as well. And finally, are you aware of ways that you can help trafficking victims in your area or the resources in your area? And about half of you did say yes, you are aware, but the other half said no. So again, hopefully by the end of this, you all will be totally well versed on the number of resources that are available in your area. Okay, so what is human trafficking? Simply put, human trafficking is a form of modern day slavery. You are taking away somebody else's freedoms for your own profit. It's just the illegal exploitation of a person for a profit. It can include labor trafficking, sex trafficking, or domestic servitude. Like with a lot of the media that we see, we tend to think that it is only sex trafficking, but again, it can be labor, it can be domestic servitude as well. So just some quick numbers behind human trafficking. In 2020, there were about 16,000 trafficking victims who were identified. About 81% of those victims who were in sex trafficking situations were recruited by family members or intimate partners. And that's one of those misconceptions that I think we'll speak about in a few minutes, that with trafficking, a lot of times you're not just being abducted in a Walmart parking lot. It is someone that you already know. And those are a higher risk group. In 2020, there was a 22% increase in online recruitment. Facebook and Instagram saw the greatest percentage increases, but online overall is the primary form of recruitment, and some more traditional places for recruitment like foster homes, things like that, saw a decrease in the last year actually. And just talking about human trafficking in the state of Tennessee, about 49% of trafficking victims are from or currently live in a rural county. I think a lot of times we think that this is just a city issue, but clearly in the state of Tennessee, it's an issue for everybody across the board. Next, we have just a listing of the top 10 counties who have the highest rates of human trafficking typically. In the state of Tennessee, human trafficking is the second fastest growing crime, right behind drug trafficking. And in Tennessee, 11 to 14 years old is the average age of initiation for those who are sexually trafficked. So we can see not only is this a major global issue, but it's also a big issue in the state of Tennessee. So just quick information there. I'm going to pass it over to Robin to take our subject matter experts and share a little bit more information with us.
Thank you. So like I said, I'm going to ask some questions that I know I personally wanted to learn more about, and just anyone can answer and then chime in, and then, it's not going to be formal. I want us to be able to have a conversation that flows. So as a subject matter expert, Rachel did give us a definition of human trafficking, but in your own words, how would you define human trafficking?
So I'll go ahead and answer that. So you did give the actual legal definition of human trafficking, which is also known as trafficking in persons, and it is modern day slavery. It does involve force, fraud, or coercion, and it has those methods to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex act. Traffickers might use violence, manipulation, or false promises of a well-paying job to lure someone into trafficking. But the coercion can be subtle or overt, physical or psychological. And then there is also the exploitation of a minor for commercial sex, which is automatically human trafficking, regardless of whether forced fraud or coercion is used.
Wow, thank you. Tikka, Christina, do either of you? It's pretty comprehensive.
You said it.
Okay. So this next one is something that I know is all over my Facebook quite often. So we all see Facebook posts where somebody was at Walmart and a white van came up and grabbed people, or somebody was following someone around a store, and people are fearful of that. And I'm wondering, is that the way that people are taken, or is that not as common? It's just a Facebook thing. Like how does this happen to people generally in your experience?
So I'll take that. I would say that, like, I think Rachel already had the stat up there about familial trafficking. Like that is by far the most prevalent way that people are taken into human trafficking. And then online as well. I mean, it was really in your stats, but through chats and Facebooks and things like that, it could be done. You could pick someone up, I suppose, but familial trafficking is by far the more common thing in our organization, what we see.
So are these posts, when people are like, this man followed me, I mean, do you see that at all? Because what you say about the online, especially now that COVID and everyone's online and everyone's at home, I definitely see how those numbers could rise. Is that just a misconception that kind of gets started like an urban legend, or does that actually happen in our area where people just grab people in a parking lot? Or
I go, yeah.
Well, I would, I don't know, Janice and Christina, I would say that when you hear the people jumping out of the vans, or they have been a part of a sting, and they are actually probably trying to help the survivor, or, trying to intercept them. They've already got something going on where they know the girl is going to meet, or the boy is going to meet John Doe at the gas station. And so that's where they capture some of the perpetrators.
Okay.
Would you agree?
Yeah, and I would also say, I think us as a society, we've seen the movie Taken, and while situations like that are very real in our human trafficking, that is not what is the most common that I have seen within my organization, and just being, kind of in the anti-trafficking advocacy for as long as I have, and in my own personal situation, being tied up in a room, kind of like a brothel, yes, that is very real. That is absolutely human trafficking. But a lot of these, like the stat said, is a boyfriend or someone having a romantic interest and luring them in that way. That's how it happens a lot with women. And we don't serve men, but I have been in presentations with organizations that do. And so the women, they have the psychological manipulation where there is violence that is definitely involved. If it's not all the time, it is at some point, but with men, violence is mainly used to, beat them into submission. But a boyfriend or a family member is the most common person in the victim's life that lures them into trafficking.
Wow. This is kind of just a follow-on with the uptick in online recruitment. Do you find that it's people posing as something that they're not, like maybe an adult posing as a teenager to try to lure someone in, or is it generally just they're paying a bunch of compliments and trying to boost their self-esteem, and they're being themselves? I mean, they're not necessarily posing as someone like a teenager, but is that how it's done online with just
Can be both, I think.
Mostly,
Yeah, I
yes.
think it's both for sure.
It's
Definitely
both.
both.
So Street Grace we've partnered with the TBI and is currently trying to, we're rolling out the bot, the Gracie bot that allows itself to become whomever. It needs to be a teenage boy, Hispanic, African-American, white, whatever age it needs to be, whatever urban or rural community it may come from. So, and they intercept those calls. And so when the calls get too inappropriate, then a text is given and asking if both people need any help. Do you need any help? And so we've gotten some feedback on that recently. And so that's working.
That's valuable. That's amazing.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. So Rachel kind of touched on this, but I'd like to hear more about it because there does seem to be the idea that all human trafficking is related to sexual activities, prostitution. So I'm just wondering, what different forms does it take? Labor, sex? Are there other ways that humans are trafficked that you've worked with within your organization?
I know for Willowbin, we specifically work with victims of sexual trafficking, but obviously labor trafficking is a huge separate thing. I know the other ladies might have more experience with that.
Yeah, currently at this time, and I know labor trafficking is actually, it's getting bigger, but our organization has served, while we have served labor trafficking victims, we have mainly served victims of sex trafficking.
Tikka, do y'all do mainly the sex trafficking victims, or do you also?
We have a direct service worker now that is we're working on prevention, the protection policy and pursuit. And so we are able to work with all those victims at this time because we have that direct service worker now.
Yeah, anytime, I'm sorry, did I interrupt somebody?
I want to hear from you.
Anytime we do have a call and it is a victim of labor trafficking, we do have referrals where we refer them out to a better organization or a resource that can better serve them. One of the things that we have noticed is us taking in, just anybody, is actually us doing them a disservice because we can't adequately, fulfill and supply their needs that they're going to need.
Right, that makes sense.
And we did have a question in the chat, and maybe you all could shed some light on it. Do you know the percentage of trafficking victims who are sexually trafficked versus labor trafficking or the domestic servitude?
So that is a really hard question to answer, because you have to take into consideration what's reported and what's not. So I'm going on, because I'm coming from Florida and I just got here to Chattanooga. So I'm going on Florida stats right now. So for every one person in Florida that was identified, 9 went unidentified. So that should just show you how we can have numbers and statistics, but the accuracy in them is not, it's not reliable, because there's so many that aren't being reported.
Wow. Thank you. Following on to that, I'm wondering if you could share what are some common misconceptions that people have about trafficking that you maybe could keep coming across? Tikka.
That is just young girls. We're noticing that boys, 14.6% of boys and 25.6 are girls. And then, you know, so the numbers are rising. And like Janice was saying, those stats go up, and that, you know, they fluctuate all the time. But now they're interjecting boys, men, young men.
And men often go underreported as well. Just
Exactly.
for various
That's exactly what I was
reasons.
going to say. Yeah. I was going to say, you know, they go underreported, and I think that the reports that we are getting now is just because it's finally being reported, and even that is underreported for what is being reported, if that makes any sense.
Is that due to a stigma, or?
Or like, what other factors do you think are impacting the underreporting in males?
That's a better way to put that. Thank you.
I could give my personal opinion, but it's not factual. I think that, you know, trafficking, especially sex trafficking, when it comes to boys and men, they don't want to, you know, reporting something, you know, them saying that they have been trafficked or forced into that type of situation. I mean, I think as a man, and, you know, I can't confirm this, but I mean, that's a hard thing to admit to somebody, you know, that has happened to you. So that's just my personal opinion. Like I said, it's not factual or anything like that, but
yeah, I'd say the same thing.
It makes sense. I mean,
I agree.
Doesn't support, you know, the support for the men in the same way, unfortunately. So following on to that, who are the victims of human trafficking? Can you kind of paint, is there a profile that you can paint a picture, or is it just all over the board? Who do you find generally?
There's not one demographic. I mean, we serve men, women, children from, you know, 4 or 5 years old all the way up through their 70s. There's not, you know, for us anyway, I know it's across the board, and it's people you would look at and you would never think, oh, well, they're a victim of trafficking.
Really?
They seem, you know, just like anyone else. And sometimes people don't even realize that they're being trafficked. But from what I've seen and from the stats that I've seen, there's not like a profile of a person.
right.
When you say that they don't realize, do you mean the people themselves, the victims themselves don't realize that they're victims?
Sometimes.
Do you find that, Tikka and Janice, that you, when they come to you, do they already know that they have been a victim and that they need this help, or is it something that needs to be made, you know, get them to understand that, no, this is not okay, you have been a victim? What?
So I'm going to go on my personal experience and just also what I have seen. So when I was recovered by law enforcement, I did not self-identify. And even after I was told what was happening, you know, I didn't believe it. But that's because the manipulation and the psychological abuse and all that ran so deep. There are some who do self-identify, but the majority of them, that what I have seen, do not. And that is because, you know, like we had said earlier, a lot of the traffickers are family members, you know, there are boyfriends. So in the victim's mind, this wouldn't be happening to me by somebody who loves me,
Right.
So that's what we've seen a lot. And I mean, like she had said before, there's no specific, like, okay, this person, how they look or where they're at, they're going to get trafficked. There are vulnerabilities that, that people have that make them more susceptible to trafficking, and that was foster care, homelessness, drug addiction. What are the other ones? I'm sorry, my brain just went blank. Abuse, neglect, poverty, and even low self-esteem.
Mm-hmm. That would be a mix. That would be like
yeah, it's you, it's me, it's, you know what I mean? Like, it can be anybody. It doesn't have like a specific age, race, gender, socioeconomic status, nothing.
Right.
So you say a lot of people don't want to self-identify, so it may be harder to get them help. But what are some red flags that if we work with young people or even adults that we can notice to help, or like what are some steps to getting help for somebody, even if they themselves don't self-identify?
Mm-hmm.
I think I can take the first part of that question. Are you asking how do you identify a child, or how would you see what are the red flags? Was that one of the questions? Isolation is one. Exhaustion, occasional indulgences, enforcing trivial demands. Yeah, some of those things.
And
so
is that
piercings
specific, or is this if we're working with youth versus if we're
so youth, I know that the unusual things like new clothing, brand new cell phones could be an issue. I did say piercings, branded, being branded some type of way. Those are a few things that I know.
So we just actually created a document yesterday of red flags and indicators that we're going to be using at another workshop on Monday. And this is for people kind of in the legal field and in the criminal justice system. So one of the things is being distrustful of authorities, demonstrates nervous behavior and avoids eye contact, is unwilling or hesitant to answer questions about an injury or an illness. Like Tikka said, has tattoos or other forms of branding. And these tattoos, it has like daddy or property of or for sale, appears to be in a state of chemical dependency. And while all these are red flags and indicators, they're not necessarily like every single one is like, okay, that's human trafficking. This is something that would make you say, okay, maybe I need to assess this person a little bit more, a little bit deeper, maybe ask some questions. And where was another one?
That's a valuable
another one in the legal. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that would be a valuable, I'd love if you could share that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. This other is, so we have repeat offenses, which may include drug possession, petty theft, prostitution, battery. I don't know how to share that. Can I share? Because I'm not the presenter, so I don't think I can share.
I think it may be just set to host, but if you don't care to email it to Robin real quick, she could share it.
Okay, hold on. Let me copy and paste.
You're putting a lot of trust in me, Rachel.
You just have to click a couple of buttons. While we're trying to get that pulled up, since we're speaking of perpetrators, what is being done to people who perpetuate human trafficking? Are you seeing that they are convicted? Are those convictions hard? Did they get an actual jail time sentence that is equitable to the crime they've committed? What do you all see in that regard?
This is something I could talk on all day. I'll let somebody else go, because this is a serious topic for me, where this is where my heart is in, as far as the legislation and the legal aspect of trafficking goes.
Then I say you go. I deal more with our organization does help in that way, but I personally deal with survivors in our program, so I don't have the expertise.
Okay, so I will. I am not talented when it comes to doing two things at once. So hold on, let me get this email.
Well, I've got a follow-on question in the meantime while you're pulling up the document. So back to what are some of the red flags? So for example, I mean, I travel a lot, and I know Atlanta airport is one of the hubs. And so, you know, in that environment, I'm not going to be able to necessarily know as much as if I were doing a class and educating youth and I was going to be around them, you know, for the evening. Are there any signs when we're just out in public that is that even something we can do or notice or get help for? I think I've read a few news stories where like a stewardess on an airplane was able to identify and get help for someone, but is the average person able to intervene in any kind of way?
We always say, you know, if your gut says something is wrong, there's probably something wrong. And what we advise people to do, you can't force someone to get help, and you can't force someone even to want help. And so, you know, if you feel like there's a situation that's amiss, you can always, if you can get that person where they're safely, where you can speak to them and just say, are you safe? And if they say no, do you want help? And if they say no, then you leave. But if they do, then we have a hotline, the TBI. There's a lot of organizations and things that have different ways you can reach out to get help if they want it.
That's good. I've wondered about that. If I'm in the airport, I don't know, that one stuck with me. Like, what do I do? Because I'm a people watcher. And so, you know, sometimes there are situations where you're like, that's kind of shady. That doesn't seem right.
Yeah, you can tell. I mean, if you feel that it's wrong, there's probably something off.
Are there differences in the way that people are trafficked in urban areas, city centers versus rural areas? Like out here, I'm in Polk County. We have one red light, so we're definitely not urban. And I'm just wondering, in terms of who is trafficked, who traffics them, the types of trafficking, sexual versus domestic servitude. Do you see a distinction between rural and urban?
I think we serve 23 counties in Tennessee, so we've got both in our service area. And I know familial trafficking, and then also a lot of drugs are connected in the rural areas. Mm-hmm. That sense didn't make sense, but you can follow what I meant there. But you know, that's something that we see more in the rural areas, is that it's a family member, it's a boyfriend. Even though that happens everywhere, it seems to be more prevalent, more of the prevalent reason in the rural areas with the people that we serve.
Tikka, do you, I know you're in Hamilton County, do you find a difference or a distinction between the two?
Tell me what the question was. I was typing the hotline numbers in. I'm sorry.
I'm glad you're doing that. If there's a difference in rural areas out in the country versus urban areas in how people are trafficked, who traffics them, the signs even to look for.
I haven't been able to gauge that yet, but I'm sure that there's documentation coming and to be able to support or give you an answer to that.
Okay, thank you. Janice, I got your, let's see. Now, Rachel, I just need to share screen and pull it up, or should I share it in the chat? If I could do that, then everyone.
Rachel, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, if you just want to hit share screen, and it'll give you an options of your screens that are up, and you just select the one that you want to show. And if you also wanted to attach it in the chat, that's an option too.
Okay. So we're going to move on a bit while I'm figuring this out, because I don't want to just have everyone sitting here staring at me.
Well, Janice, since now you're back to one
Yeah.
task, do you care to speak on the perpetrator part?
Sure. So, and I saw the question in the chat box about what is being done with the perpetrators, getting them behind bars. What I have seen when it comes to prosecuting traffickers, human trafficking is a really hard crime to convict somebody of. And one of the other things that I have noticed is when it comes to and I don't know if this is because, the victim is unwilling to testify or what it is, but there's a lot of times where the perpetrator is arrested and the victim is arrested as well. And when it comes to the victim, a charge is held over the victim's head to gain compliance in order to get the victim, or in order to get the perpetrator, convicted on the charge that they have been arrested on, which in my opinion, that is exploiting the victim, but in a prettier way, right? It's like we're doing this and we're holding this over your head because we want compliance. And then I'm not saying that that's what happens in Tennessee, but that happens a lot in Florida. So there's not, there's a lot of talk on, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Nordic model. So the Nordic model is completely decriminalizing any type of legal repercussions when it comes to victims, and only going after the perpetrators and the buyers, and that's it. My opinion on that is, I don't think you can have a victim and a criminal, in the same, it's either they're a victim or they're a criminal, which one is it? My recovery process did involve an arrest, and so I don't know what the ultimate, answer to that is. I don't know if it needs to be decriminalized, where victims aren't, prosecuted, because just in my personal opinion, me being arrested saved my life, but at the same time, once I was arrested, I was also offered, help and resources and a program. And I went through that program. And so I'm still, 5 years out dealing with the wreckage of my past before I was actually identified as a victim. And so it's a lot of undoing of that. And so that takes so long. So there's no set, sentence as far as time goes. I've seen people get charged with human trafficking and get 3 years. And I've seen other ones get charged with human trafficking and get 25 years. I think it all depends on the facts of the case. And there's no set guidelines. And I think that, in our laws, eventually, hopefully that will change as far as like, okay, if human trafficking, someone is charged, this is the time that they're getting, whether it's 25 years, life, whatever the case may be. But yeah, that's my take on that.
That's really, that's something else. I mean, that's amazing that you credit it with saving your life. And I totally see that viewpoint. Like so much of what all of you have said tonight has really kind of expanded my awareness of this. I'm glad that you were able to get the help. And I do wish that the people who do this could be definitely brought to justice. I've kind of asked this before in a different way when I was asking about what to do in the airport, and then Tikka did share some numbers in the chat, but what can I do if I think that someone is a victim of human trafficking? And Christina, you said, ask them, are you safe or do you need help? If it's a youth, I'm assuming that that's going to be a bit of a different answer because, we need to protect our kids. What can we do if, especially with youth, if we're teaching in a group and we see someone there and there's some red flags happening, what would you suggest?
Outside of,
Go for it. Okay, I'm sorry. I would just, if you're in a group setting, you've got probably a school counselor or someone like that you can connect with. And that would be my first step, would be to plug in with someone who's there in that child's life, who's a safe person. And if all else fails, you've got 911, if it's an urgent, immediate situation.
So I want us to all realize that we are mandated reporters. So
Yes.
everybody on this call are mandated reporters. So if you see something, know something, err on the side of caution and report.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. A lot of people don't realize that we are all mandated reporters. I think there's a misconception that it's only teachers or law enforcement, but that it is actually everyone. And so that's definitely, I'm glad you said that. So I know all of you do work with the victims. So what community resources are available? I'd love to hear more about what each of your organizations do. And if you know of other resources, what's out there to help people who've been trafficked?
Sorry, go ahead, Tikka.
Okay, I'm sorry, Janice.
No.
Before I get sleepy. So I wanted to go ahead and mention that we're looking for other partners, but we do have a direct service worker. I am the outreach coordinator, so I go out and try to find people to coordinate services with. So our direct service worker would be working, like it's going to be a warm handoff. So there's nothing that person or that survivor is going to have to do alone. So we have the direct service worker, Tierney, that will introduce you guys later. She's new, she's getting her training in. And so we'll be able to meet her, follow up with her. So we'll meet with you, Robin, sometimes next week or week after next, whenever you have some availability. But we, like I said, we want to help and get those resources together for that participant. And just get a hand up, not one down.
Okay. And Janice, Christina, do you want to chime in?
Sure. So I put in the chat box her song, Hope Line. We have currently at the moment, we're still, coming off the ground here in Chattanooga, but we have 3 safe homes that are long-term residential safe homes in Florida. And so we do, we serve victims of human trafficking. We do a lot of education and awareness in the community. We also have written the curriculum for grades K through 12 in the Duval County Public School system, to where every single year, every single grade, they are learning about human trafficking. So that's kind of the 3 things that we do in the community. And we're looking to definitely bring, open the safe home, long-term residential safe home here, but also eventually, hopefully, bringing up those other aspects that we are have expertise in from Florida into the Chattanooga area.
That curriculum sounds amazing. I wasn't aware of that. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So we have a long-term residential program as well at Willow Bend Farms, and then our community clients are individuals who are survivors of trafficking that are able to live independently, alone, or not alone necessarily, but live independently, but still need our support. And so we're able to provide support in 5 key areas of life that we've identified as spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, and financial. So anything that they need help with in those ways, we've got people, going through college, different things. And then we do a lot of awareness training as well through our Are You Awake campaign. And so we will come to any organization, anyone that wants to have us for free to train them. We also have online trainings that we advertise on our social media if you want to find that. doing a lot this month because it's Human Trafficking Awareness Month, but really throughout the year we have them as well. And we also have a volunteer base that we pull from quite a lot as well if people want to get involved in that way.
Well, I guess I forgot to mention thank you. I probably should have let you go first, Christina. So our lenses are Christ-centered, child-focused, and demand-centric. And so our 4 pillars are prevention, protection, policy, and pursuit. So those are the areas that we want to bring focus on. And as Christina stated, that we do provide training, whether it be in person or virtual. We have an excellent, well-speaking executive director, Ryan Dunlap. Some of you guys may have already met him. And he's an ex-law enforcement, so he has hands-on experience on human sex trafficking as it pertains to Georgia. So we brought him to Chattanooga or to Tennessee areas to provide some of that light and demand an end to sex trafficking, human trafficking.
He is a really good speaker. I've been fortunate enough to listen to one of his seminars. So as parents, is there anything that we can do to help protect our children, both in terms of how we monitor what they're doing and where they're spending their time, and then also just emotionally or to kind of shore them up, to teach them, to train them if we can, to what to look for, what to watch out for, how to recognize when someone is playing them and perhaps trying to pull them in, like online.
So there's an app out now. Those phones they can be helpful and they can be hurtful all at the same time. So we want to be cognizant of what our kids are doing, who they're actually talking to. Kids these days will talk to anybody.
Yes, they will.
Anybody, and so you may want to try putting those apps on the Apple phones or something like that. I would suggest strongly urge parents to look out for the inappropriate computer device usage of the youth, young adults.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to kind of piggyback off that. As we said earlier in the presentation, online is the biggest platform that traffickers use to lure their victims. And so I think, having parental controls on all electronic devices is absolutely needed. And not just a parental control, but, looking into your children's, platforms that they're talking to people on. I don't have it with me. I would have to get it, but we have a list of apps that have trafficking has been reported where kids and people were lured on them, TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, these are these apps that are supposed to be like safe for kids because they're kid apps, but they're on there, playing games, and that's a pedophile's breeding ground, to lure these kids on. And I think, not just talking to our daughters about, being susceptible or being vulnerable to traffickers, but boys as well. And not just in the aspect, and I know the majority, women can be traffickers too. They can be the perpetrators 100%, but also talking to the boys, because, you're raising up the future men of our generation, and to view women in a different light than what is being portrayed to them. You think about how many images kids see in a day just on these social media apps, and they're just, women are so over sexualized, and sex is just, flashing in front of their face all the time, and music and everything is just, glamorizing the life. And so I think teaching them as well, because, those could be future buyers and those could be future perpetrators. So I think that that's important too.
And I like what you guys have already said, but I would also add, you're the parent, they probably don't need their phones in bed at night in the middle of the night, things like that you can kind of control. You're not going to see them 24/7, but when you do have that ability, I think it's important to take it.
In addition to the parental controls, are there conversations that we could have with them that would, because a lot of times, preteens, teens, they're kind of resistant to anything we have to say, or they think that we're just being overprotective. And I would love to enable them and empower them to know what to look for. What you said though is that these people are experts in sounding just like one of their peers. And so it may be pretty impossible, I imagine, to even know that you wouldn't necessarily have signs that this is an adult or a pedophile versus just a peer. What conversations could we have with them to say, you need to look out for this, or this is something that should be a red flag to you when you're on these apps?
As a parent, I think it's important, and in this field, I think it's important for your child to be trained or know. Like, if you don't know, then you just don't know. But if you know, right? So let's teach. Let's prevent it by teaching. Even though I know that even though we may teach it, it still may not register. But knowing, just having them to know, getting them this CSEC training is free. Just get a bunch of teens come on, and then we just sit here and Q&A, answer, questions, then answer all the tough questions. We could call it, go to your room. Our parents want the kids to go to the room when they're having these tough questions or life is happening, but they actually need to know what's going on instead of not knowing.
Yeah, I don't. Sorry, I don't think you can sugarcoat, this topic and even change, the words and the language that you use. It needs to be shown for what it is and talked about. It's a tough conversation to have, but I think, having it with your kids is absolutely imperative for them to know. I mean, there's free online safety, trainings for kids that you can watch, and like Tikka said, the CSEC training, that is, I think kids think in their mind, nothing like that would ever happen to me, and it's so much more common than you think. And a stranger that they have been talking to, that now they're familiar with, they're no longer a stranger. They wouldn't think that, that's somebody, but you have no idea who was on the other side of that phone.
Right.
And I think stressing that is key to them. And even, I'm not saying like scare them, but, get some real situations, that have happened, some real reports, and tell them about it.
And I think addressing it in an age appropriate way from, the time that they're little is super important as well. So that it's not just coming at them when it's too late, addressing it from the beginning so that they're familiar and know what is really important.
And I like the idea of the trainings, because oftentimes what comes out of our mouth as parents can be ignored, and someone external can say exactly the same thing, and they're going to come home and say, do you know what they taught me? And it's, it's brilliant information, even though it's like, well, I just actually told you the same thing. So having a training that your organizations or others can do is pretty valuable, especially for the teens who, don't necessarily tune into what their parents think. So lastly, being a victim of trafficking is obviously a very traumatic event, and it can have long-term consequences, including with reproductive health and taking care of one's reproductive health, getting yearly exams. Is there a way to assure clients to feel comfortable? Are you finding that providers out there do have trauma-informed care, and that they're sensitive to this area, and that they know how to talk to their patients? And do you find that the victims themselves are reticent to go to the doctor and to receive care, or is that something that you have any numbers on, or that you've had experience with?
In my experience, I've seen both as far as providers are concerned. We had a provider not too long ago with one of our clients that said, "Oh, I've never met a victim of sex trafficking before. What's it like?" That's not great, but typically people are pretty sensitive, I think. And I think as awareness grows, people know more and more how not to respond, and just common sense, honestly. But and I do think, especially with, your female exams, that can be difficult. It can be very triggering. And so really finding a provider that is sensitive to that is super important. Once we kind of latch on to one of those, we like to use them for multiple clients because, it's good to have that safety.
Well, yeah, I think having partnerships with other people in the community that are trauma informed is so key, because the last thing, that we want to happen is we want to re-traumatize, these women. They haven't felt safe in so long. And so we never want to be the one that adds to their, their trauma. So we are very, very, I guess I'm going to use the word picky about who, we allow around our women, because I mean, they're the reason why we do this. They are our main, goal. Not goal. They are our main focus. And we never want to add to any more of what they've already been through.
Right. Well, is there anything that I haven't asked you that I probably should have, or that needs to be highlighted and that people need to be aware of, that you would like to end off and tell us about or share with us?
I am just sitting down. I know that you asked the question, and this is it, and I'm typing it in the chat as we speak. The warning signs. I wanted to list those: multiple STIs, STDs, family history in the commercial sex industry, hotel and motel keys, large amounts of cash, prepaid gift cards, new clothes, new shoes, new jewelry, electronic devices, as we spoke of, irregular school attendance, inappropriate dress for occasions, and whether a significant older boyfriend or girlfriend, chronic runaway, homelessness, special mark tattoos, like I said, of brandings, new material goods, a sudden change in appearance or behavior, and explicit sexual online pressure. Presence, sorry.
That's a comprehensive.
Some of those, and I'm gonna type those in the chat box.
Thank you very much. We have a question from someone. This is great. They ask, what are your biggest needs right now in your agency, and how can your community help you with this really difficult job?
I know for us, there's multiple ways. Volunteering is super important. You can really get involved with us in a number of different ways as far as volunteering is concerned, from hands-on with the clients to just, volunteering at events, different things like that. But also helping us to raise awareness is really important, bringing us out to speak at an event, or just, talking to your circle about it. That makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, I'm going to also agree with Christina on that, and also prayer. A lot of prayer is definitely needed, for these women, and for us and other anti-trafficking organizations to continue and to come together as a community, because human trafficking is a complex problem, right? And there is no one solution to this complex problem. It takes all of us as a whole, and there's not one organization that's doing everything, but, each organization is doing a couple things well. And I think that that's important. But volunteering, I'm actually going to put Bree's email in the chat. Once we get our house up and running, definitely volunteers are going to be needed. These women need love, and just somebody that is going to support them and love on them. So that's definitely a huge way you can help, and bringing awareness and education. If you want us to come and speak, at your church or your organization or your place of employment, we would love to do that. And just get as much information out there, because education is key. Because once you know, and now that you can't say you didn't know.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Sorry.
Before we transition into like a full Q&A, I just wanted to say a couple things real quick. We will send out an email of this recording once we're done today, and we'll also include all the information for their wonderful organization. So if you are interested in a training, if you are interested in volunteering, things like that, you'll have the contact information necessary to follow up with any of these organizations. We posted all the hotline numbers in the chat box, but we will also be sure to include those in the email that we send out afterwards. Also, when you exit out of the Zoom, there will be a survey link that pops up, and we'll also include that in the email too. So whichever one you'd rather fill out, we just like to gather demographic information about the people who attend our educational sessions. But that's just the little housekeeping that we needed to do. So we'll open up now. If you have any questions that you'd like to verbalize instead of chatting into the box, feel free to say them now, and hopefully Janice, Christina, and Tikka will be able to answer them.
I just had a question to clarify. I may have misunderstood, but Tikka was mentioning apps as far as what parents can do to ensure that they are keeping their kids safe. And I don't know if there are actually apps that can help parents that they can download onto their kids' phones. That I'm not sure if you were meaning, Tikka, the parental controls. So if there are any apps that I can tell parents about by name, that would be great.
Absolutely. Most definitely, if the child has an Apple phone, there's an Apple app specifically designed for sex trafficking, human sex trafficking. So you can download that in the app store on your any Apple device.
Okay, thank you.
I want to say, I can't remember if it's the FBI website or it's some type of law enforcement website that has the, I guess, legit parental control apps. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but you could also Google, if it's not an iPhone, the ones for Android. And then there's like best parental control apps for 2022. And, you can go through them and figure out which one you would want to use. Yeah, that's out there for sure.
Okay, that's very helpful.
Don't have an iPhone.
Okay, that's very helpful, because I was kind of afraid that even if I just Google some, I may get some that some of the perpetrators might, have, created. So hearing that from you all, I feel safer. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody put in the chat that Bark is one of the apps that you can use, and I know that's what we use for my oldest child's phone. It allows the parents to like link and be able to get notifications for like certain kinds of posts or certain texts that are sent, things like that. So that can be a really great way for just parents to be informed without the kid knowing and without it being like a, we're tracking every single thing that you do type app.
Okay, thank you so much. That's good to know.
Does anybody else have any questions they'd like to ask?
I have a question. When you see middle age to older adults, I guess because somebody mentioned all the way up to 70 years old, is it more because of like a drug related thing, or do you know why they're being trafficked at an older age like that?
It certainly can be drugs. It's really what we said earlier. The demographics are so broad, and there's not really one particular reason for it, but drugs definitely can play a part for sure.
Okay. Well, if we don't have any more questions, again, we'll be sending out an email with everyone's contact information and how you can get involved in their organizations if you're interested. Also, just some information about other resources for human trafficking. So if you're interested in more statistics or anything like that, just letting you know where you can find that information. And as always, we're a Step Ahead Chattanooga. You can find us at stepaheadchattanooga.org. This webinar, as well as our past webinars, are listed in the event site of that website. So if you'd like to pull up any past webinars or watch this one again once it's posted, that's where you can find them. But if nobody has any other questions, thank you so much, Janice, Christina, and Tikka for this conversation. I hope that everyone found it very informative, and that hopefully, like you all said, education is what you need. Once you know, you know. So hopefully you all now are in the know. Please enjoy the rest of your Thursday night, and we hope that you'll join us in April for our next Tough Talk. Thanks.
Thank you all.